Good afternoon. Welcome to STEM Week, an exciting time of the year for all things STEM. STEM Week is the opportunity for us to share out all across the state opportunities in STEM, different events and activities for students to participate in, and for organizations and companies to share to those students just what's going on in their world of STEM. This afternoon's event is University School of Medicine presents Journeys in STEM. This event was developed in partnership with Mass Hire, Metro North Workforce Board, Metro North STEM Network, and Tufts University. Thank you so much for joining us. This event is being recorded. I'd like to start now by introducing myself and the panel. My name is Heather Darby. I am STEM Programs Manager with Metro North Workforce Board / Metro North STEM Network. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator, Ali Sassani. Ali is a second-year medical student at the Tufts University School of Medicine. He's originally from Southern California and moved to Boston in 2018 to pursue his master's in biomedical sciences. As a first-generation college student, Ali has benefited from mentorship in medicine, served as a mentor in various capacities to support other first-gen and presenting students who seek to become physicians. In his spare time, Ali enjoys rock climbing, yay, running, and surfing in frigid East Coast waters. Panelist Margaret Bayless is a second-year med student at Tufts School of Medicine as well, and is interested in pursuing pediatric surgical specialty. She's originally from Boston and was a non-traditional medical student applicant. Margaret gained experience at organizations such as Massachusetts General Hospital and Cancer Centers of America. And prior to matriculating at Tufts, worked as an analyst at a biotechnology executive search firm. During undergrad, she studied health and communication development abroad at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. She is passionate about community health policy and enjoys being an advocate for young women pursuing careers and leadership positions in medicine. Panelist Ed Habasa. Ed is a second-year medical student at Tufts as well. Born in Boston, family later traveled to Syria, where he stayed until having to leave in 2012. Upon his return, he studied biology at UMass Boston and later worked as a medical technologist at the Massachusetts General Hospital, which is now Mass General Brigham, if I'm not mistaken, for 2 years before entering medical school. Being the eldest child of immigrants, Ed understands the difficulties in having to navigate a path without knowing who or where to ask for help, but has succeeded through the kindness of others and enjoys giving back when he can. Panelist Jack Roberts is second year as well at Tufts University School of Medicine. He was born and raised on Martha's Vineyards off the coast of Massachusetts. Jack played baseball at Williams College and graduated in 2018. He then moved to New York City for 2 years to do clinical research at the Hospital for Special Surgery. He's a big fan of the New York Giants, New York Mets, and Boston Celtics, and would like to pursue a career in sports medicine and orthopedics. Jack is excited to share his path to medical school during STEM Week. Panelist Glenn Robeson. Glenn is second year as well at Tufts University Medical School. She was raised near Chicago and has lived in Boston since she began college. Glenn has a strong interest in teaching and broadening access to medicine and the sciences. In her free time, she enjoys cooking, running, and playing with her dog. Excuse me. Panelist Shantira Taylor is second-year medical student as well at Tufts University School of Medicine. Originally born and raised the youngest of 5 in the western suburbs of Chicago. Her Her passion for medicine is rooted in human connection and amplifying the voices of those that society has put last and counted least. She's devoted to serving underserved, homeless, and incarcerated populations to combat patient barriers in health access and optimization. In her free time, she enjoys cycling, traveling, DIY projects, and spending time with family. Welcome to all the panelists and moderators. I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to our moderator, Ali.
Thank you, Heather. So we've all kind of introduced ourselves by way of the PowerPoint presentation, so we can kind of skip over that part and I guess get straight to the questions. So the first series of questions are going to be kind of focused on our exposure, so initial exposures to medicine and other clinical experiences that we pursued as pre-medical students, usually during college or gap years and sometimes earlier than that. So I guess to just get started, the first question will be, what was the seed that planted the idea of becoming a physician in your mind? And we'll pass that off to Meg, who will answer first, and then Jack will give us his answer after Meg is completed.
Sure. Thanks, Ali. I really like this question because it gives me an opportunity to talk about how any reason, no big, however big or however small, is a valid reason to pursue medical school. I think deciding to be a doctor is a big decision. And so naturally we feel like we need a big reason, like to sort of defend that career choice. And so I was always looking for, an aha moment or a life-changing or like life-altering moment. And that never really happened for me. I think in reality, these decisions happen quietly over a long period of time. And I think that that's natural for it to be sort of anticlimactic. So I think the true seed for me was I took a human anatomy elective in high school, and then I took some bio courses that I liked, and then I took human anatomy again when I got to college. And eventually somewhere along the way that I figured out that I liked those more than I liked my other classes. And I think I felt confident that my curiosity about the human body would be able to hold my interest as a career. And that's not a glamorous story. And I think that that's okay. I don't think you need like a big aha moment in order to make an educated decision about your career choice. You may have a bunch of little small reasons that you want to be a doctor, and those reasons are just as valid.
Great, thanks, Meg. And I completely agree with you. Seems to be kind of the same story for me. Jack, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. I had a few different events that kind of pointed me in the direction of medicine and becoming a physician. I actually went to college pretty set on majoring in like history or political science with like the eventual goal of like maybe going to law school. But I ended up taking a chemistry class my first semester as part of a requirement, and I really liked it. So in addition to the political science and history courses, I kind of just kept taking the chemistry courses as well. And then at the same time, one of my dogs who had been diagnosed with osteosarcoma in his leg, which is just a type of bone cancer. And he was pretty young. He was probably like eight or nine. So it was really difficult kind of hearing that he had the cancer, and to give him like a few more months before it spread and before he passed, we decided to have the vet remove his leg where the cancer had been. And then I don't know how, but my parents like discovered a trial that was taking place at Penn Vet in Philadelphia, which was offering a experimental cancer immunotherapy treatment to dogs. And so that actually got me really interested in cancer research, and like together with the new interest that I kind of had in chemistry, that I guess put me onto my like initial path of considering healthcare and medical school. And then just seeing how well my dog had done from the trial kind of helped reinforce that. So yeah, that was kind of the first thing.
Thanks so much. Very interesting story, very unique. Haven't heard anything like that before. That's awesome. And we're going to be moving on now to kind of building off of the first seed that was planted. What is your earliest clinical experience, and did that play a role in choosing to continue the path towards medicine? And for that one, we'll pass it off to Ed, and then Shantiera will answer next.
Yeah, sure. I suppose my earliest experience was as a patient. You know, we're all pediatric patients, but I think this question is more asking about you know, outside kind of experiences. And I ended up working as an intern after high school with kind of a research with an integrated healthcare research kind of institution, part of MGH, and Mass General Brigham now. But yeah, and it basically focused on kind of you know, as the name goes, integrating healthcare and kind of technology. And so we beta-tested Fitbits. We built kind of regimens that are kind of like rehab stuff. I don't know if any of the people watching this would be familiar with the Xbox 360 or the Xbox Kinect, but that kind of like computer vision kind of thing. And yeah, we got to speak with some patients, and that was really encouraging. That was probably my earliest experience. My later experiences as a medical technologist, so where your blood draws go, or where your any kind of laboratory testing goes, that was also, you know, kind of interesting to see what happens in the back end of the hospital, and that was pretty interesting to me as well. And yeah, it definitely encouraged me to continue going into healthcare and medicine specifically.
And then whenever I think about my first clinical experience, I think about something kind of unconventional, because I think about when my grandfather was diagnosed with cancer when I was 8 years old. So I was very immersed in like patient care and different things of that sort, seeing all the different gaps that my family had regarding his diagnosis and seeing how vulnerable my grandfather was in that position. So that really stuck with me. But my more conventional first time in a clinical experience was at a sports medicine clinic after I graduated high school as well, similar to Ed. And in that experience, it was really cool to learn, like, what does it feel like to get up at 5 a.m. and then be somewhere for 5 hours? Like, am I really dedicated to this? So that experience really taught me like what it feels like to sacrifice and to be really determined and dedicated to something. But overall, I learned that I don't want to do sports medicine. That's not my population. And I think that's also really important too, right? Knowing what you do and what you don't want to do. I resonated more with like terminal illnesses and things of that sort, as opposed to like acute things.
Great, thank you both for sharing. And I guess also kind of building off that, I'd like to hear from Glenn about any potential negative experiences that you've had, either working directly with a physician or with the healthcare system, and you know how this kind of affected your desire to pursue the path to medicine.
Yeah, so I was really lucky growing up. I had access to really wonderful physicians and really wonderful care. And as a child, I was really able to kind of go through, besides allergies and skin rashes and what have you, really being not having to utilize the healthcare system in a meaningful way. But I do have severe allergies. I do have anaphylaxis to different nuts and peanuts and such. So when I was a freshman in college, I had an anaphylaxis reaction. I ended up in the hospital. And in that experience was really my first time with a poor interaction with a physician. Really, in the experience, I was made to feel very responsible for my anaphylaxis. I felt very small. I felt very unsupported in a really scary experience. Because anaphylaxis is where your throat closes up and you're really not able to breathe, and it feels very, very scary because you're not able to breathe, you're panicking. And up until that point, I really didn't understand how important empathy was and emotional care was in the physician-patient relationship. And at this point, I had been considering a career in medicine or tangential career in the sciences, but this experience really opened my eyes to how much empathy is needed in the practice of medicine and how much good communication is really pivotal to caring for patients. And so it really shaped my understanding of what it is to be a physician and really inspired me to be better than that physician was to me. And I think every physician has off days and has bad moments. And I don't think that that physician meant to make me feel that way, but that's just how I felt in the situation. And it was just a very scary negative experience that I want to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody ever again.
Yeah, it's great that, you know, the positive and the negative experiences end up shaping us kind of into the person that we want to be. And they don't always have to dissuade us from the path, even though sometimes some physicians can try and do that. But we'll get to that eventually too. So now we're going to kind of pivot to mentorship and guidance. So after kind of people have made the decision, I think, to pursue this career, it's always very helpful to have people who've been there before, who either make you comfortable, maybe look like you, and allow you to envision yourself to be in their shoes one day. And so this question, I'll have Jack answer first, and I'll follow up. How important is mentorship in the grand scheme of becoming a physician? And who was your first mentor, and how did you meet them?
Yeah, so I mean, I think mentorship is really important, particularly in medicine. A lot of the learning you do or that we do, and a lot of the experiences we have as a student, you know, are of course with those who are older than you and those who have already gone through some of those difficult and challenging times as a student. So, you know, I think if you're able to develop a student mentor relationship, I think it can be really beneficial and help facilitate kind of the entire learning process. But also the mentor or your mentor can kind of become someone who you turn to for advice and for help making decisions. And, you know, school is definitely not easy no matter what level you're at. And so having someone that you can turn to and who can offer support and guidance, I think can be, as I said, really beneficial. And my first mentor in kind of the healthcare field was probably a physician that I worked for in New York City after I graduated from college. I took 2 years off because I wasn't totally sure if I wanted to do med school. So I just wanted to get some more experience in medicine and kind of in a clinical setting. And I was really, really lucky, very, very fortunate because she was very incredibly supportive and really pushed me to succeed and genuinely wanted me to do well. And if I hadn't had her as a mentor, I don't exactly know where I'd be today. So again, I think it's incredibly important to try to find someone who you can turn to and who's truly willing to offer that guidance and support as you pursue your different paths in life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about the importance of mentorship. I think that's kind of like obvious at this point. So I'll kind of shift to my first mentor, who was a pulmonologist that I worked with as a medical scribe. So I essentially would go into his office and go into patient visits with him and take his notes for him while he was talking to patients, so he could focus more on kind of caring for them and talking directly to them instead of being hidden behind a computer with the electronic medical record. And really, I think kind of the main thing that I took away from that relationship was, I remember vividly one day in clinic, he said, it's really important to remember like what your value add is to the relationship, because value enables you to, I feel like, get closer to the mentor. So if you're offering, for example, in my position, if I'm writing a good note, he's doing his job better, he's more efficient, and he's probably more inclined to have, you know, a better relationship with me and is kind of willing to invest in me as well. And I found that to be true. And so kind of looking at where you're at, if you see someone who you think you want to be a mentor for you and you want to ask them, you know, how can I help? And like, what can I do to learn? And maybe have a few ideas of like what skills you want to pick up from them, and be like, look, this is what I want to learn and this is what I want to do. How can I support you? And make sure that you're kind of adding value to that relationship so that they can, you know, then the mentorship just kind of comes naturally, and they're like, huh, this person, you know, is really investing in this working relationship, and I'm definitely going to help them out. So mentorship, crucial, I think, to find someone that you feel like can kind of guide you on your path, especially if you're first gen, or if like you're the, you know, first person in your family who's going into medicine. And so the next question is kind of asking about, is it important to have multiple mentors or just one that knows you really well? And do all of your mentors necessarily need to be physicians? And Shantiera, you can take it first, and then Glenn, I'll have you follow up after she's done.
So I actually am also a first generation medical student. So I really didn't have much access to physicians, and I really didn't have a physician mentor until recently this past summer. So I really think that it's really important to have mentors who know you outside of the medical field, because I feel like when you enter the medical field, only so much of you can come to it. So I feel like someone who knows you and can really bluntly and give you a lot of candor about yourself. And it's really just about support personally for me from a mentor, someone who really values me and it can encourage me to overcome certain hurdles. Because one person that comes to mind when I think of a mentor is a student advisor from undergrad, someone who never had been in medicine, but she made sure I got through the MCAT. She helped me with my interview, mock interview sessions, and I thought that was really valuable. But something that's really valuable about having a physician mentor is they know what you need to know in like 4 steps, right? So it's really important to have that perspective of someone who has been there and someone who can support you in a more special way. So I would say that it's really important to have mentors that are from a number of backgrounds, not just medicine, just to give you perspectives that aren't just so one-sided, and just to make sure they know you very well.
I definitely echo everything that Shantiera just said. I think that in order to become a doctor, you have to become a person first. And so having those mentors who know you and can challenge you and push you to grow, even starting in high school and college before you might even be considering a career in medicine, are super important in just your development as a person. So me personally, similar to Shantiera, I didn't have any medical or doctor mentors until after I decided to kind of pursue this path and sought out that kind of those kinds of relationships and those kinds of working or intern positions that place you in close contact with a doctor. For me, one of my most important mentors was my college theology teacher, who has no interest in medicine, no understanding of medicine, but really just pushed me to be a more critical thinker and pushed me to challenge myself and develop a more complete understanding of the world and understanding of myself. And I think that was really critical to becoming a physician and becoming a person who understands people who are different than my own, or not different my own, different from myself. I think that it's very important to have those kind of fundamental relationships early on in your career that help you grow and help you learn, just as a person and not necessarily as a physician.
And in that vein, Meg, have you ever had anyone who told you you were unfit to become a physician for any reason, or just in general, physicians who tried to convince you to change your path? And how did you react to that? And did it affect your desire to be a doctor? And after Meg answers, we'll pass that also to Shantiera to answer.
Thanks, Ali. That's a big question. I did have people tell me that I was unfit to be a physician, and it was incredibly discouraging. My first semester at my undergrad institution, I started and like right off the bat immediately got like a C or a D in general chemistry. And to this day, it was probably, it was boring, it was hard. I mean, it just wasn't my cup of tea, and that should have been okay. But instead, I had a meeting with the pre-med advisor. I remember it like really vividly. She was in a big white coat and, big wooden desk. I was sitting across from her in some oversized blazer that I had pulled out of my roommate's closet. And she told me that I would not get into medical school with the grades that I had, and that I should no longer pursue a career in medicine, and that I should instead go into public health. And her words were incredibly influential. I was an 18-year-old woman. I had just moved out of my parents' house at the time, and this advisor saw an opportunity to, talk a young woman out of medicine, and she chose to do so. I listened to her. I took her advice. I did exactly what she said, and I pivoted to public health. And even though I think this ended up being okay for my path specifically, because it gave me an opportunity to explore, I often think about the other young woman that she perhaps had talked out of a career in medicine that semester or that year. And I think the most important takeaway was that it didn't end up affecting my desire to become a doctor. It ended up affecting the confidence in my ability to become a doctor. And that was something that I had to unlearn throughout my postgraduate and graduate school years. So I think the message would be to take discouragement of your career choice with a grain of salt. I think discouragement can come in many different forms, and just be aware of when it's happening so that you don't internalize it. It's okay to disagree with parents, advisors, friends, etc., on what's the best path forward for you.
Margaret, I'm so sorry that you have that experience, but I'm so happy that you're so resilient and you have such a great outlook. I completely echo everything that you said. My experience also is very similar to Margaret's. I was actually volunteering in a hospital. Like I was stocking blankets in an OR ward. Like it was very mundane to say the least. And this doctor, I was just chatting up with him, like, how are you? And he just was very unhappy. And he was telling me like, yeah, are you sure you want to go into medicine? Like it's 10 years this, and don't you want to have kids? And like, why don't you just become a nurse? And I respect all careers in the medical field. No, we need all of them to work as the system that we are. But I just felt like he was looking at me as a woman and like, he wasn't valuing like what I could bring to the field. And as Margaret said, I also internalized that, especially as being a Black woman. I literally didn't know any doctors. I didn't know any Black doctors. So I was just thinking like, can I do this? Like, should I just be a nurse? Like just settle to be a nurse, right? So I thought it was really important in that time to turn to my support system, like my mom or my other friends who also wanted to go into medicine, who knew me and could be there to like revalidate and just support me, as well as working on that confidence and walking in it. Because I feel like in medicine, you do have to be very confident. It's something that you learn as you go. So definitely an experience that I think about often. And I'm just like, he was wrong.
I think if we all had $1 for the amount of times that we were told to do something else, we'd probably be able to at least pay off our first year of tuition here at Tufts, which is no insignificant amount of money. Yeah, I think that as the saying goes, if you want to do it, it's a matter of time, right? And kind of going off of that, I think, as medical students, we kind of get this reputation of like, oh, we did everything perfectly and there were never any mistakes. But we want to kind of hopefully dispel that today. And so, Ed, I'm going to pass this question to you. Is like, what was your kind of like, oh shoot moment on your path to medical school? And did you think that that mistake or mistakes in general are an important part of your personal growth?
There's many moments in my kind of medical pathway career. I've actually made the joke often that I've fallen upward many times and reached medical school. So yes, I think some of the most critical ones were one, probably not educating myself on when to take the MCAT. I thought the kind of the medical school application cycle was similar to college or even other graduate programs, but it's much longer. It's more than a year. So that was one thing that cost me at least a year until I found out very late. And the other thing was kind of involving myself in research that took longer than I was expecting, and I hadn't communicated with the PI appropriately, even though like we knew my plan was, but the research sometimes doesn't work out as you expect it to. There's unusual findings, there's no findings. And so that was a mistake of mine, was kind of banking on that a little too heavily in part of my application process. And one last bonus mistake was probably general life advice is don't argue with a boss. And this is kind of a big shift from the other two, but say a boss you might have been considering asking for a letter of recommendation, it's just generally not a good idea to argue, even if you're right. And I'm not saying I was, but generally it's not in your favor. It won't usually go the way you expect it to, unless it's something egregious and that you can't really ignore. Otherwise, kind of let sleeping dogs lie. But yes, I learned from all of those. I keep myself educated on application processes now. Research, I'm much more careful in involving myself with the research. And I've definitely learned to nod and smile when I'm expected to. And yeah, those are all learning experiences for me, and things I'm happy I made at an earlier stage than a later stage, where those kind of mistakes can be quite critical and costly. And so it might have taken me a little longer than I expected to get into school, but I suppose they were helpful experiences, not quite expected, but helpful.
Yeah, I think the mistakes can be, negative experiences if you choose to kind of frame them that way. And it's all important to consider like what kind of perspective you're going to take moving forward. And so I'll also kind of share a couple of my moments. So the first moment was really graduating college with below a 3.0 science GPA, which is not really something you want to be doing if you're trying to go to medical school. And so that was kind of a tough pill for me to swallow, especially because I had done so well in school up until getting to college. And it definitely took a few years of reflection and working in the space and finding mentors to help me feel like this was something I could work towards, so that I would be motivated to perform in the classroom, and also just like willing to put in the work that was required, because getting to medical school is not an easy task. And I really think ultimately it was that rock bottom moment of graduating, having the poor GPA, speeding up to take the MCAT, getting a pretty bad score, and freaking out and signing up for the MCAT again like a month later and getting the same exact score. And finally, I remember I came home and my mom kind of, who was not a physician and has no, like position in healthcare, but has a lot of great life advice, looked at me and was like, just go work with a doctor and see if it's like even for you. And it's fine. Like, if you don't want to do this, just do something else. Ultimately, like, we don't want you to be miserable. And that was kind of a relief, because coming from a Persian family, it's like there are several options for careers. Like, you're either a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, or nothing. And so that was kind of nice to not have that pressure on me anymore. But after I did start working with physicians, I kind of started to realize, I'm like, wow, I could do this. And started kind of rebuilding the confidence, took some classes, did well, retook the MCAT, was able to do well, did my master's at Tufts, and that enabled me to kind of get where I am now, which I think obviously it was a very critical part of my path, or else I wouldn't be here right now. So they're all learning experiences. I think there are people who have a perfect path to medical school, and that's fine too. But like Ed said, I think making these mistakes early on can be helpful, so that you don't make them on later in life, when maybe you have a family, a career, bigger things on the line, where the consequences can be a lot more significant. And so in that vein, Meg and Jack, I wanted to ask, is it possible to recover from academic failures like poor grades or an MCAT score and still become a physician? Sorry, Meg, if you want to go first. And then...
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can go first. Yes, of course, it's possible to have academic failures and still become a physician. I had so many academic failures in undergrad. I had a terrible GPA. I didn't recover academically until I did a master's program at Tufts. And I love Ed's falling upward sentiment. I think failure, academic and otherwise, is just a part of growing up. I think part of what makes failure so devastating for us is that we end up comparing ourselves to the folks around us, thinking, why did they succeed? What did they do differently? What's wrong with me? And this is why comparison is the thief of joy. There's always going to be someone with more research experience, with a better MCAT score, with better undergraduate grades. who spent more time studying. And I think the bottom line is to not worry about their journey. Just keep working hard and working towards your own goals. And there's a solid chance that you'll end up in the same medical school class as someone who had all the research experience, who had the best grades. It completely depends on, I think, as long as you keep going, despite your failures, that's all that matters.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I definitely agree. I think, as we've seen with the other panelists, it's definitely very possible to recover from, poor grades or other academic failures. And, my freshman year in college was not great academically. And, I think what's most important is how you kind of respond to the academic failure, or how you respond to having like a tough year or a tough couple years. And I think it's really important to look at like the overall trend of like your academic outcomes over the course of schooling, whether it's in high school or college. So if you don't do well or don't do as well as you'd like early on, but then over time, there's improvement or trend upwards, I think that really reflects very positively on you as a student. And, we of course all want to do well right out of the gate, but that's not necessarily always going to be the case. And it can take time to adjust to new settings and new methods of teaching, whether in high school or college. Or med school. And so I think if you're able to like learn from those initial academic failures or mistakes and make the improvements in how you study, or, how much you study, then not only should that hopefully translate to like improvements in academic performance, but like also I think it looks really impressive as well, because you're responding to a challenge. So if you don't do well at first, I think it's totally okay. And how you respond is much more important, and can really help kind of highlight who you are as a student.
So as we kind of like wrap up, I kind of wanted to ask everyone on the panel if you could go back in time, give your younger self some advice, what would it be? And Shantiera, we'll start with you, and if you want to just kind of pick someone to answer after you, and we'll go through everyone.
This is a great question. I would say if I could talk to my younger self, I would say, don't be afraid to try anything once, and always network. I think it's really important to always put yourself out there and get outside of your comfort zone. I feel like that was something I was really afraid of doing in undergrad. So being more bold and just having conversations with people, no matter what their status is, if they're a doctor or if they're your peer, you belong, and you are gonna get through this. And I will popcorn it to Jack.
So I would say, follow what you're interested in. And I eventually did follow my interest in chemistry, and that ultimately like helped lead me to where I am now. But there were a lot of times, like early on in college, where I wanted to like just like give up on chemistry, even though I liked it, because like I came into college set on studying history and law. So, I'd say stay open-minded. And pursue what interests you the most and what you're most passionate about. And I'll go to Glenn.
Yeah, I would say similar to what everybody else has said, but don't be afraid to ask for things. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. The worst thing that somebody can tell you is no. And if somebody tells you no, that's not a fault of your own. It's just that it was a no, and just to become really comfortable with being told no, because all of us here have been told no so many times, and yet we're still where we wanted to get to. So it's just becoming more comfortable in that, and not seeing it as a closed door, but seeing it as a way to find a new opportunity and a new path, and one that's going to be really bright. And I'll popcorn it to Ed.
If I could go back and give my younger self advice, I would probably say many of the things you guys have already said, but um, don't be, well, one, you don't have to be a biology major to get into medical school. That's not right. Two is knowing that you should probably major in something you're interested in and take, pre-medical prerequisites or just a major. But other than that, yeah, don't be too concerned about your GPA. You should have taken more classes that you were interested in, and yeah, I think that's one of the big ones for me. Who has not gone? Meg, have you gone?
No, I can go. I agree with everyone's sentiments. I think something that I would have found helpful is that I think pre-med culture can be incredibly draining and competitive and not really fulfilling. And I found it to be really scary. And, if the pre-med culture isn't for you, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not going to get along with your colleagues someday. It just means it's not, your cup of tea, and that's totally fine. So ignore what you need to, take your time, figure out what you like. And if you do choose to go into medicine, don't let anyone talk you out of it.
And I'll kind of wrap up. I have one piece of financial advice and one piece of life advice. And I know some people might be thinking high school is a little bit too young for financial advice, but I don't think it is. The one thing I would do, especially if you're a high school student who is working, I would open a Roth IRA yesterday. I think as physicians, you're kind of expected to quote unquote stay in your lane and just kind of do medicine, but financial freedom is an incredibly important tool that, especially for first generation students or children of immigrants or anyone who's trying to kind of climb the so-called socioeconomic ladder, it's an important thing to educate yourself on your finances and try to put yourself in a good position to gain financial independence. So open a Roth IRA. And the second piece of advice that I have is just to be kind to yourself, especially when things are not going well. I think, medicine does tend to select for people who are like either quote unquote overachievers or high performing or whatever you want to call it. And I think it can get exhausting. I have definitely succumbed to that. And I think what has made it harder is being like too hard on yourself. And so find something that you like, whatever kind of outlet it is, because you're going to need it for the rest of your life, and just kind of pick an outlet and stick with it. And if it's not working for you anymore, that's okay. Pick something else. But it's always important to have that type of outlet. And yeah, I think I guess we have like a Q&A portion, Heather, if we want to do something like that. I also have links to some resources that I can pop into the chat that everyone here has kind of put together.
Yeah, I actually do have some questions from the student perspective. So I was wondering, as first generation med students, persons of color, women in STEM, et cetera, did you have any specific programs coming up, whether in high school or undergrad, that were supportive of your specific path, that you really benefited from and even continue to benefit from today? Anybody?
I can hop in here. I did a program with Morehouse College in I believe my second year of high school. It was a program for physician researchers. So I had the opportunity to have a summer in Atlanta, and I worked at the CDC. That was really cool. So I had the opportunity to do some public health work as well as shadowing some clinicians. So that was 100% pivotal. I can't talk, sorry, in my career. And I still have connections with the students who were in the program. One student is a first year here at Tufts, so I get to talk to her. That's really cool, as well as my mentors and just having that connection to the CDC. And I'm really passionate about public health. And there are a number of programs like this at Cornell, Morehouse, Johns Hopkins has one. And I think I put the link on the document that I shared, that Ali just shared, but if not, I'll add it now.
Yeah, so there's a program at Boston Children's specifically for high school students who are interested in research and just gaining clinical experience, and it's in the anesthesia department. I can drop a link to that as well, and it's over the summer. It's basically one summer where you come to Boston. I know with the pandemic it might be a little bit different now. I don't know if they're actually like having the program right now or when they're going to start back up, but I can definitely drop the website in the chat. And from the few students that I met, it was a great chance to get some exposure to research in a clinical setting, and obviously at one of the best children's hospitals in the world. So I think finding those types of experiences in high school can be kind of enlightening. So I definitely encourage people to kind of seek stuff like that out. And for anyone who's going to college, I think like most colleges have kind of like a pre-med society or whatever, and there's many different kinds of them. I didn't take too much advantage of them during college, but I stayed on the newsletter, and like for the last 4 years before I got into med school, I definitely took advantage of those resources. So I highly recommend people look into that if they think they're interested as soon as they get into college.
Okay, I thanks for that. I have another question unless someone else wants to answer the first question. Okay, so my next question is, what do you think are some key traits or offerings that students should look for in undergraduate programs, students who are interested in pursuing medicine?
That's a great question. I can tell you what I did and I wish I didn't do, which was I looked at the acceptance rates from colleges into medical school. I would just encourage students to be very critical of these institutions that offer really high acceptance rates from their pre-med programs. Make sure that they're including, all of the students who start out as pre-med. I think there's different questions you can ask and different ways to kind of poke around the admissions department, just to see if they have a high acceptance rate and they say, we love it because 90% of our freshmen make it through the pre-med program, then that's great. But if they say, we have a panel that, you have to get by in order to apply, in order to get a letter of recommendation, make sure they're not trying to weed you out or count you out before you even start. I think, unfortunately, it's sort of a conflict of interest a lot of the time where pre-med advisors are required to have these really high statistics and say, we get everyone into medical school, but make sure that, it's the consistency is there, that there are mentorship programs in place, that there are buddy systems in place where, they're making sure that you make it through as a freshman, not just in after you're a senior.
I think also you don't have to go to a school that offers a specific pre-medical program. Being a pre-med student is really just taking, I think it's a total of like 8 different courses. It's a very small requirement. And what's much more important is that you're enjoying your education and getting the most out of your education and not just checking off the boxes. So finding a undergraduate institution that you feel at home in, that fosters your intellectual spirit and gives you kind of the resources and support that you need rather than what you think will look really good to a medical school. Because I don't think that when you're entering undergrad, there's so many different paths that you can take besides medicine, that making sure that you're doing something that makes you happy, that supports you, is so much more important than trying to reach one specific goal, because so many things can change along the way.
Yeah, I think another thing kind of on a different note, working in school, I think a lot of people end up either needing to work in school, whether it be in college or even during medical school. And so I think that can obviously be challenging with classes and all of that kind of stuff. I worked all 4 years of college and did volunteering and all these things. So I think it's just important to remember, like, you're in school for a reason. And obviously it's not great to take out more loans, but making sure that you do have the time to succeed in class. So balancing your work schedule with all of these things is important, and cutting back on things and knowing when to say no to things so that you can make sure that you put yourself in the best possible position to do well. coming out of college. I don't know if anyone else has experience like working while in school and wants to share as well. Obviously, I think people would love to hear about that. But that was just kind of something I wanted to share.
And I have one last question if no one else wants to answer the last one. Okay, how much sleep do you really get?
I don't sacrifice sleep. 7 to 8 hours, like hard stop at 11 and I go to bed.
Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure you're getting enough sleep. So yeah, like 7 to 8 hours, because if you don't get enough sleep, then you're not going to be able to function or do anything. So yeah, I think it's important to make sure you're getting enough sleep.
I think sleep and also rest, self-care, rest, just time for yourself. I have not found medical school to be the pre-med culture of, all-nighters, work hard, play hard. It's very calm. We're all adults here. We all get 8 hours of sleep and find time for ourselves. It's definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah, and
Right.
while medicine, oh, sorry.
No, speak, Lynn, speak.
Oh. Well, medicine is something that takes a lot of your time and a lot of your commitment. It's not your entire life. It's really just preparing for a profession. So it's really important to get enough sleep, to have other interests, to make sure that you spend time with family and friends, because those are the things that are really going to support you when things get rough. So it's not all about throwing all of yourself into this. It's about making sure that you're caring for yourself and making sure that you take time to be well.
I think the answer to these questions, the answers to this question might be a little different if we were asked in our third year doing surgical rotations or stuff like that. But being in the first and second years, medical school is a little different from high school and undergrad, where you don't have a lot of take-home assignments and labs to work on. You're mostly studying on your own time. And that gives you a sort of flexibility. There is mandatory stuff that you have to do and coming into school and kind of going to clinics, stuff like that. But medical school for the first and second years, at least, gives you that kind of flexibility to just study. And if you think about it, there's quite a few hours in the day if you even set aside your 8 hours of sleep. Luckily, a good amount of sleep now, but maybe come back next year and ask.
And then I just wanted to add, I agree with everything that all of my classmates have said. And I think that just kind of speaks to the culture here at Tufts School of Medicine. And when you get to the point when you're applying to medical school, just really look for a supportive place where students are happy and like still can do their hobbies. You should never have to sacrifice your hobbies or your sleep. Yeah, I also get 8 hours of sleep. Very restful girl.
Yeah, a lot of that I feel like has to do with grading stuff, culture. I think like when it comes to that stage and figuring out like how do I figure out the culture of a school? It's hard to do it at interview day, honestly, because it's so like staged, it feels like. And so I feel like if you can reach out to students, like if you can get a list of clubs, find people that are into things that you're into and really just have like an aside conversation with them off that interview day, it can be really, really helpful to kind of get some insider knowledge.
Well, thank you all so very much. It was quite a pleasure listening to you talk about your experience in medicine, your journeys to medicine. Thank you very much to Ali for being our moderator. Thanks to all the panelists. We really appreciate it. One of the things about STEM Week is the theme is see yourself in STEM. And through your discussions, your perspectives, your questions and answers, our students will be able to see themselves in STEM as well. I was on another event the other day having to do with scientists and different types of science occupations. And at the end of that session, a little girl told her teacher, well, you know, I always thought about being a marine biologist, but now I know I really want to do it. So, you know, it's that kind of impact that we're looking to make during STEM week. And I know you've done that today. So I just want to thank you for that. Thanks to Tufts University School of Medicine. Thank Karen O'Hagan, who helped me put this all together. I'm so appreciative and grateful. Yeah, and so I guess that's it for today. We really appreciate your being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing, Heather.
Thank you.